Hello, and welcome to a place where history isn't about dramatic battles or famous emperors, but about the slow, steady rhythm of lives lived long ago. A place where the past can simply wash over you, soothing in its detail and its distance from our own time. Tonight, we invite you to forget the glory so often associated with Rome, to set aside the images of gleaming legions in perfect formation. Instead, we will embrace the grind. We will journey to the very edge of the empire, to a world of damp stone, tedious routine, and the quiet, persistent struggle of the common soldier. This is the unspoken reality of a Roman legionary. A life not of constant conquest, but of enduring presence. A life where the greatest enemy was often not a painted warrior from the north, but the cold, the damp, the weight of your own equipment, and the relentless passage of time on a misty frontier. So, find a comfortable position, let the sounds of the present fade away, and allow yourself to be transported to the northernmost reaches of Britannia, to the wall built by the Emperor Hadrian, to a world where you are just one man in a long line of men, holding the line against the wilderness. #1. A legionary's grind on the Hadrian's wall frontier. Narrator. Imagine yourself here, not as a tourist walking the remains of the wall today, but as a soldier nearly 2,000 years ago. The air is cool and thick with moisture, a constant, clinging damp that seeps through your wool tunic and into your bones. You are a legionary. Your home is not Rome, not even a proper city. Your home is this fort, Vindolanda perhaps, or Housesteads, a rigid, rectangular island of order in a sea of green, rolling uncertainty. The first thing you would notice, the thing that defines your entire existence, is the weight. The weight of your duty, yes, but more immediately, the physical weight of your world. Your Larica, segmentata, the iron plate armor, rests on your shoulders like a cold, metal shell. It weighs perhaps 20 or 30 pounds. On your head, a bronze helmet, its cheek pieces pressing against your skin. In your hand, scutum, a large, curved rectangular shield made of wood and leather, with a heavy iron boss at its center. It feels less like a tool of war and more like a door you are compelled to carry. And then there is the march, the Justice March, the military step, 20 miles in 5 hours, a relentless, grinding pace. But here, on the frontier, the march is not across open, sunny Italian roads. It is along the muddy, rutted track that parallels the wall, or on patrols into the mist-druided hills beyond. The Sarsena your marching pack, is a wooden T-frame from which hangs your bedroll, a wicker basket, a hand mill for grinding grain, a cooking pot, a digging tool, and rations for up to 2 weeks. This pack alone can weigh over 60 pounds. So you move a figure encased in wood and metal, your breath pluming in the cold air. The only sounds, the rhythmic crunch of your cure heavy-soled, military sandals on, the gravel, the jangle of your kit, and the labored breathing of the man behind you. This is not a sprint to glory. It is a slow, deliberate walk that wears down your boots, your body, and your spirit, day after day after day. When you are not marching, you are building, or repairing, or drilling. The life of a legionary is one of constant, mundane labor. You are a soldier, yes, but you are also an engineer, a carpenter, a stonemason. You quarry stone for the walls, continuous maintenance. You fell trees to repair the fort's palisade. You mix mortar and tamp down the gravel for the Via Praetoria, the main street of the fort. Your hands, meant to hold a gladius, are more often calloused from the grip of a pickaxe or a shovel. This labor is the true purpose of the army on the frontier, not to fight, but to build, to maintain, to impose Roman order upon the landscape itself, one stone at a time. And what fuels this endless labor? Not feasts, but a monotonous, practical diet. The core of your sustenance is Paul's a thick porridge made from spelt wheat, boiled in water until it forms a dense glutinous mass. It is filling, but bland, a canvas upon which you might add a few vegetables leeks, onions, perhaps some lentils. Your bread is a hard, dry biscuit, bucellatum, which must be soaked in water, or your thin, sour wine, posca, to be edible. Meat is a rarity, usually pork, preserved with salt. A small daily allotment of wine, watered down into that sharp posca, asterisk, serves as a safe alternative to the uncertain local water. It is a diet designed for endurance, not enjoyment, a constant reminder that your body is a tool of the state, to be maintained with efficient, if unappetizing, fuel. The rhythm of your days is enforced by a discipline that is absolute and brutal. The centurion carries a vine staff, not just as a symbol of rank, but as an instrument of correction. A minor infraction, a poorly polished piece of armor, a moment of inattention on watch, could earn you a beating. More serious offenses, like falling asleep on sentry duty, could be punished by fustuarium being clubbed to death by your own comrades. The law is clear, and its application is swift and severe. This ever-present threat is the backdrop to every action, every chore, every moment of your life. It is a system designed to erase individual will, to mold you into a single, functioning cog in the vast machine of the Legion. And then, there are the Watchers, the long, lonely hours of the night. Imagine standing on the ramparts of the wall. The world is reduced to the circle of flickering light from your oil lamp. Beyond, there is only darkness and a deep, impenetrable silence, broken only by the cry of a distant animal or the sigh of the wind through the grasses. You stare into that mist, that unseen enemy. It is not a Pictish warrior you fear in these moments, but the stillness itself, the sheer overwhelming boredom and the slow creep of cold that seeps through your cloak. This is the true frontier. Not a line on a map, but a state of mind, a place of waiting, a place of wait. A place where the glory of Rome feels very, very far away, and the grind is the only thing that is real. This was the foundation of the empire, the life of the common soldier, defined by routine and struggle. But from the damp frontiers of Britannia, our gaze now turns east, to the dying days of the empire itself, and to a man who tried to change the very soul of Rome. The weight we spoke of earlier, it was not just a sensation, but a precise and calculated burden. Let us consider it further. This collection of objects that became your entire world. The Lorica, segmentata the segmented plate armor, was not a single, solid piece. It was a complex assembly of iron plates and leather straps, designed to give some flexibility to the torso, but when donned, it became a rigid cage. The inside might be lined with a thin, padded garment, subarmalus to prevent chafing, but after a long march in the rain, the wool would be soaked, and the cold metal would press against you, leaching your body's warmth. The hinges and buckles required constant maintenance to prevent rust in the damp British climate. A spot of brown on a strap was not just a cosmetic flaw, it was a failure in discipline, a tiny rebellion against the order that held your life together. Your helmet, the Gallia was a masterpiece of protection, with its neck guard, cheek pieces, and brow ridge. But it also narrowed your world. The cheek pieces limited your peripheral vision, forcing you to turn your head to see to the sides. The sound of your own breathing was amplified inside it, a hollow, echoing rhythm that accompanied the beat of your heart. In the quiet of the night watch, you could hear the blood pulsing in your own ears, a reminder of your fragile humanity encased in this shell of imperial might. And the shield, the scutum it was your mobile fortress. Curved to deflect blows and missiles, it was constructed from strips of birchwood glued together in 3 layers, each laid at a right angle to the last, then covered in canvas and calfskin. The central iron boss, the umbo was both a weapon and a reinforcement, but its weight was immense, holding it at the ready for drills, or for hours on a patrol where tension made every shadow seem a threat, was an exercise in pure muscular endurance. Your left arm, your shield arm, would be consistently more developed, more tired than your right. It was a physical asymmetry that mirrored the psychological one. You were always in a defensive posture, always bearing the weight of expectation. The march, the Justus March was a study in controlled agony. 20 Roman miles, about 18.5 of our modern miles, in 5 hours. This pace, just under 4 miles per hour, was relentless. The caligay on your feet were ingenious in their way, open to allow moisture to escape and to let the feet swell during long marches without being constricted, but they offered little protection from the terrain. The thick, nailed soles provided grip, but the open design meant your feet were constantly exposed to mud, gravel, and the cold. Blisters were a fact of life. The rough leather straps could chafe the tops of your feet and ankles raw. You learned to pack moss or spare cloth into the caligae as makeshift padding. A small, personal comfort not taught in the training manual. The Sasana the marching pack, was where your personal life intersected with your military one. It was a wooden T-frame carried over the shoulder. From it hung your life, a cloak, the sogum a heavy woolen garment that was your primary defense against the wind and rain, a woolen blanket for sleep, a wicker basket for carrying turf or other materials, a bronze cooking pot, patera which served as both a cup and a pan, a small hand mill, the mola manuaria for grinding your daily ration of wheat, a leather bag holding your rations, the hardtack bucellatum a little salt, perhaps some cheese, a digging tool, the delabra a combination pickaxe and hatchet. This was not a light day pack. It was a portable existence, a burden that meant you carried the evidence of your own survival everywhere you went. When you finally reached the end of a day's march, the work was not over. The first order was always to build a camp, a temporary, fortified position for the night. Every man had his task. Some would dig the defensive ditch, throwing up the earth to form a rampart. Others would gather stones to reinforce it. Others would go out in detail to forage for wood and water. This was done every single day on campaign, a ritual of self-preservation. Here, on the frontier, the camp was permanent, but the principle of constant labor remained. There was always a latrine to be cleaned, a section of the wall to be repointed, a barrack room to be swept. Idleness was the enemy of discipline, and so you were kept in motion, from the first dim light of dawn to the last fading glow of dusk. The barrack room, your home, was a long, narrow building divided into 10 or 12 rooms, each housing a contubernum a tent party of 8 men. You shared this small, dark space with your 7 comrades. Your bed was a stone shelf, perhaps with a straw-filled mattress. A small alcove held your personal belongings, which were few, a spare tunic, a writing tablet, if you were literate, dice made of bone or clay for games of chance, a lucky charm from your homeland. The room was heated by a single, small hearth, and the air was thick with the smell of wood smoke, damp wool, leather, and the sweat of tired men. This was your sanctuary, yet it offered little privacy and only basic comfort. The sounds of others snoring, coughing, the soft murmur of conversation were the soundtrack of your night, and through it all, the landscape itself was a character in your life. Britannia was not the sunny, Mediterranean world of Roman myth. It was a land of muted colors. The greens were deeper, often grayed by mist. The skies were a vast, shifting tapestry of gray and white. The wind had a voice here, a constant low moan as it swept across the moors and whistled through the crenellations of the wall. The rain was seldom a violent storm, but a persistent, gentle drizzle that could last for days, turning the fort into a quagmire of mud and the world beyond into a formless, dripping gloom. You fought this environment more than you fought any human enemy. You fought the damp that rusted your sword in its scabbard. You fought the cold that stiffened your joints. You fought the sheer, overwhelming sense of isolation, of being stationed at the very end of the known world, a world that seemed perpetually twilight. This was the grind. It was the accumulation of 10,000 minor discomforts. It was the weight of your armor, the blandness of your food, the chill of the stone you slept on, the sound of the wind, the endless, repetitive tasks. It was a life of service where the greatest act of heroism was not a single glorious charge, but the simple, stubborn act of getting up each day, shouldering the weight once more, and taking your place on the wall. This was the unspoken reality, the foundation upon which the glory of Rome was built, one steady, weary breath at a time. This was the foundation of the empire, the life of the common soldier, defined by routine and struggle. But from the damp frontiers of Britannia, our gaze now turns east, to the dying days of the empire itself, and to a man who, from within the heart of power, tried to change the very soul of Rome. Number 2. Julian the Apostate, the philosopher's crusade from the tangible, physical grind of the legionary on the wall. We now turn our gaze inward to the struggle of a single mind against the tide of history. We travel from the misty frontiers of Britannia to the heated theological and political centers of the 4th century empire, to a man who was, in his own way, as isolated as any soldier on a lonely watch. His name was Flavius Claudius Julianus, though history would remember him as Julian the Apostate. And his story is not one of battles, though there were many, but of a quiet, deeply personal crusade to restore a world that was already fading into memory. Imagine, if you will, a childhood shadowed by constant fear. Julian was a nephew of Constantine the Great, the emperor who had embraced Christianity. In the bloody power struggles that followed Constantine's death, Julian's father, half-brothers, and other relatives were killed by imperial orders to secure the throne for others. He was just a boy, only 5 or 6 years old, when he learned the first and most brutal lesson of his life. To be a prince of the blood was to live under a suspended sword. He and his elder brother Gallus were spared, kept as political pawns, and moved from one distant estate to another, their lives a form of genteel imprisonment. This early existence, devoid of security or love, forged in him a deep distrust for the court and the new Christian faith that its powerful members so publicly professed. It was in this atmosphere of silent peril that he first sought solace not in prayer, but in books. His isolation became his sanctuary. He was given an education, and he immersed himself in it with a fervor that was almost religious. While others at court practiced their new faith, Julian discovered the old world. He found his prophets in the pages of Homer and Hesiod. His theologians were Plato and Aristotle. He walked with the thinkers of the Athenian Academy in his mind, and in the quiet of his studies, he fell in love with the classical past. He was taught by the finest pagan rhetoricians of the age, men like Libanius, whose letters paint a picture of a serious, intensely curious young man, hungry for the wisdom of a pre-Christian world. This was not merely an academic pursuit. For Julian, it was an escape into a realm of beauty, reason, and order, a stark contrast to the violent, treacherous reality of his own life. When he was older, his cousin, the Emperor Constantius II, allowed him to travel and study further. He went to Athens, the heart of the ancient world he so revered. Here, he walked the same streets as Socrates and Pericles. He engaged in philosophical debates, and it was here, in secret, that he was almost certainly initiated into the ancient pagan mysteries. He grew a philosopher's beard, long and untrimmed, a public signal of his intellectual allegiance. He looked the part of a Greek sage, not a Roman emperor, but fate, and the constant draining wars on the Persian front had other plans. His brother Gallus was elevated to the rank of Caesar, then executed for treason. Julian, the bookish philosopher, was suddenly the last viable male relative of the ruling house. He was summoned to the court, named Caesar, and packed off to Gaul to deal with barbarian incursions, a role he neither sought nor, it seemed, was suited for. But here lies one of the great contradictions of his life. The philosopher, the reluctant soldier, proved to be a surprisingly competent general. He led campaigns along the Rhine, winning victories and securing the frontier. He shared the hardships of his men, earning their loyalty and respect. Yet, throughout this military service, his inner life continued to burn with a different flame. He wrote philosophical treatises and hymns to the old gods, like the sun god Helios, whom he saw as the supreme deity of a complex, philosophical paganism. His paganism was not the simple rural superstition of the countryside. It was a sophisticated, Neoplatonic system of belief, with a single supreme being emanating through a hierarchy of lesser gods and demons. He saw in Christianity a crude, irrational faith that had torn the empire from its philosophical and cultural roots. Then, in 361, his troops, loyal to him and distrustful of the distant Constantius, proclaimed him Augustus. Civil war loomed, but was averted by the timely death of Constantius. Julian, the philosopher king, the student of Marcus Aurelius, was now the sole ruler of the Roman Empire, and he immediately began his great work, his crusade. He did not launch a bloody persecution of Christians. His method was far more subtle, and in some ways, more profound. He sought to marginalize them, to outcompete them. He removed the privileges Constantine had granted to Christian clergy. He reopened pagan temples and called for the restoration of their rituals. He promoted pagans to high offices and sought to create a structured, organized pagan church with its own hierarchy and charity, mirroring the very structure of the Christianity he opposed. He wrote extensively, arguing his case, trying to use the power of reason and the pen to roll back a tide that had been flowing for generations. But the tide was too strong. The empire had changed, Christianity was no longer just a faith. It was embedded in the social and administrative fabric of the state. His attempts to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, a project intended to theologically disprove Christian prophecy, faltered. The people of Antioch, a sophisticated and largely Christian city, mocked his beard and his austere habits. His intellectual paganism failed to capture the popular imagination that the simpler, more emotional appeal of Christianity held for the masses. He was a man trying to rebuild a beautiful, intricate vase that had already been shattered. He could piece it together, but the cracks were everywhere, and it could no longer hold water. His crusade ended, as so many Roman stories do, on a battlefield in the east. During a campaign against the Persian Empire, he was mortally wounded. The accounts of his death are layered with legend. Some said he was struck by a Persian spear, others that he was assassinated by a Christian in his own ranks. What is recorded is that, as he lay dying, he gathered his philosophers and friends for one final, sorrowful discourse. He reportedly said to the Neoplatonist philosopher Maximus, "You have won." Galilean, acknowledging the victory of the faith of Jesus of Nazareth. And then, the philosopher Emperor, the last pagan ruler of Rome, was gone. His death was not just the end of a man, but the end of an idea. The door to the classical world, which he had struggled so hard to keep open, swung shut with a final, quiet thud. His life was a testament to the power of an idea, and his failure a reminder of the relentless, impersonal momentum of history. The story of Julian is a deep and personal mystery of faith and power, but it is not the only mystery the legions left behind. For sometimes, it was not an idea that vanished, but an entire body of men, leaving behind only questions etched in stone and silence. From the tangible, physical grind of the legionary on the wall, a world defined by the weight of iron and the chill of stone, we now turn our gaze inward to a different kind of frontier, a frontier of the mind and the spirit. We journey from the misty, green-grey landscapes of Britannia to the heated, marble-paved centers of power in the 4th century empire, to a man who was, in his own way, as isolated as any soldier on a lonely watch. His name was Flavius Claudius Julianus, though history would remember him with a title bestowed by his enemies, Julian the Apostate, the turncoat. And his story is not primarily one of clashing armies, though there were many, but of a quiet, deeply personal, and ultimately tragic crusade to restore a world that was already fading into memory. A world of ancient gods and classical reason, a world he knew primarily from books. Imagine, if you will, a childhood devoid of the comforts of family, shadowed instead by the cold, sharp edge of constant fear. Julian was born into the very pinnacle of Roman power, a nephew of Constantine the Great, the emperor who had, with the Edict of Milan, lifted persecution from the Christians and set the empire on a new course. But to be a prince of the Constantinian bloodline was less a privilege and more a death sentence waiting to be carried out. After Constantine's death, the empire was divided among his sons, and the ensuing struggle for supremacy was a bloody affair. In 337, when Julian was just 5 or 6 years old, a purge swept through the family. On the orders of his cousins, his father, his half-brothers, and numerous other relatives were killed, their lives extinguished to secure the throne for the sons of Constantine. Julian and his elder brother Gallus were spared, not out of mercy, but out of political calculation. They were children, potentially useful pawns, but too young to be immediate threats. Their lives became a form of genteel imprisonment, moved between remote estates and palaces in Cappadocia and Nicomedia, constantly watched, their every word and action reported by the household staff, who were as much jailers as servants. This early existence, a paradox of luxury and profound peril, forged in Julian a deep abiding distrust for the imperial court and the new Christian faith that its most powerful members so publicly and, to his mind, hypocritically professed. It was in this atmosphere of silent, smiling treachery that he first sought solace, not in the prayer he was taught, but in the dusty scrolls of a forgotten world. His enforced isolation became, over time, his only true sanctuary. He was given a classical education, as was fitting for a young man of his station, but he immersed himself in it with a fervor that was far beyond mere academic requirement. It became his refuge, his religion. While others at court practiced the rituals of the new faith, Julian discovered an older, to him more brilliant, universe. He found his prophets not in the Gospels, but in the epic verses of Homer and Hesiod. His theologians were not the church fathers, but the profound dialogues of Plato and the logical inquiries of Aristotle. He walked in his mind with the thinkers of the Athenian Academy and the Stoics of the Stoa. He was taught by the finest pagan rhetoricians of the age, most notably Libanius of Antioch, even if initially only through correspondence. The letters of Libanius later painted a picture of his serious, intensely curious, and almost melancholic young man, hungry for the wisdom of a pre-Christian world, a world that seemed to him governed by reason, beauty, and a virtuous pursuit of truth. This was not merely an intellectual exercise. For Julian, it was an escape into a realm of cosmic order and philosophical clarity, a stark and beautiful contrast to the violent, superstitious, and treacherous reality that constituted his daily life. He was raised as a Christian. Of course, he was even ordained a lector, a reader in the church, forced to participate in the rituals of a faith he was beginning to inwardly reject. One can imagine the young Julian standing in a basilica, chanting the Psalms, the words feeling hollow on his tongue, while his mind was miles away, contemplating the Platonic forms or the heroic virtues of Achilles. This double life, this necessary hypocrisy, must have been a peculiar torture, forcing him to cultivate an immense inner privacy. He learned to mask his true thoughts, to present a compliant Christian exterior, while his heart and mind were fervently pagan. This skill at dissimulation would later serve him well in politics, but it also speaks to a profound loneliness. He could trust no one completely. His true companions were the long-dead authors, whose works he devoured in secret. When he was in his late teens, his cousin, the Emperor Constantius II, allowed him greater freedom to travel and study. His journey to Athens in 355 was a pilgrimage to the heart of the ancient world he so revered. Athens was no longer the political powerhouse of antiquity, but it remained the unrivaled center of philosophical and rhetorical learning. Here, he finally walked the same streets as Socrates and Pericles, breathed the same air as Plato. He attended lectures, engaged in philosophical debates with contemporaries like Gregory of Nazianzus and Basil the Great, who would later become towering figures of Christianity, a historical irony that would not have been lost on any of them. It was here, in the shadow of the Parthenon, that he was almost certainly initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, the most sacred of ancient pagan rites. These mysteries promised initiates a revelation about the afterlife, a comfort and a certainty that the Christian teachings had failed to provide him. He grew a philosopher's beard, long, untrimmed, and somewhat unkempt, a public and deliberate signal of his intellectual and spiritual allegiance. He looked the part of a Greek sage, an ascetic thinker, not a clean-shaven, pragmatic Roman emperor. But fate, and the constant, draining wars on the Persian front, had other, more worldly plans for the bookish philosopher. His brother Gallus had been elevated to the rank of Caesar, a junior emperor, to help rule the East, but his reign was marked by cruelty and suspicion, and in 354, Constantius summoned him and had him executed. Julian, now the last viable male relative of the ruling house, was suddenly and terrifyingly thrust into the spotlight. He was summoned from his beloved Athens to the imperial court at Mediolanum, Milan. One can picture the scene. The young man, his beard, perhaps a subject of whispered ridicule among the courtiers, standing before the powerful, austere Constantius. In 355, despite his clear lack of military or administrative experience, Julian was named Caesar, married to the emperor's sister Helena, and packed off to Gaul to deal with rampant barbarian incursions, a role he neither sought nor by all appearances was suited for. It was a potential death sentence, sending an intellectual to a military graveyard. But here lies one of the great and fascinating contradictions of his life. The philosopher, the reluctant soldier, proved to be a surprisingly competent, even inspiring, general and administrator. In Gaul, he did not remain aloof in his palace. He learned the art of war, sharing the hardships of his men, eating the same simple food, and sleeping on the same ground. He led campaigns along the Rhine, winning a decisive victory at the Battle of Argentaritum Strasbourg in 357 against a much larger Alemanni force. He reformed the corrupt tax system in Gaul, alleviating the burden on the local population and earning their gratitude. He secured the frontier, proving himself to be a capable and just ruler. His troops, who had initially been skeptical of this bookish Caesar, grew fiercely loyal to him. They saw in him not a distant aristocrat, but a leader who embodied the old Roman virtues of virtues, simplicitous He wrote hymns to the old gods, most notably his hymn to King Helios, where he outlined his sophisticated Neoplatonic theology. His paganism was not the simple, rural superstition of the countryside. It was a complex, philosophical system of belief. He saw the universe as a great hierarchy of being, emanating from a single, transcendent, supreme god, often identified as Helios, the sun god, the intellectual principle of the universe. This supreme being emanated its power through a pantheon of lesser gods and demons, who mediated its influence to the material world. He saw in Christianity a crude, irrational, and exclusive faith that had torn the empire from its philosophical and cultural roots, promoting faith over reason and fanaticism over tolerance. Then, in 361, events reached a climax. His troops in Gaul, loyal to him and distrustful of the distant Constantius, who was demanding they march east for a Persian war, proclaimed Julian Augustus. Civil war loomed. Julian marched his armies eastward, securing the Balkans as he went. But conflict was averted by the timely, and for Julian fortuitous death of Constantius from a fever. Julian, the philosopher king, the student of Marcus Aurelius, was now, at the age of 30, the sole ruler of the Roman Empire, and he immediately began his great work, his crusade to restore the old ways. He did not launch a bloody persecution of Christians. His method was far more subtle, intellectual, and in some ways, more profound. He sought to marginalize them, to outcompete them on a level playing field. He issued an edict of universal toleration, which had the strategic effect of allowing exiled heretical Christian bishops to return and sow discord within the church. He removed the privileges and tax exemptions Constantine had granted to Christian clergy. He reopened pagan temples that had been closed and called for the restoration of their rituals and sacrifices, in which he participated openly and frequently, the smoke of the offerings a public declaration of his faith. He promoted pagans to high offices in the bureaucracy and the military. And its own moral code, consciously mirroring the very structure of the Christianity he opposed. He wrote ostensibly, arguing his case in works like Against the Galileans, trying to use the power of reason, rhetoric, and the imperial pen to roll back a tide that had been flowing for generations, but the tide was simply too strong. The empire had changed in the decades since Constantine. Christianity was no longer just one faith among many. It was embedded in the social and administrative fabric of the state, its bishops often acting as civic leaders, its ideology woven into the lives of millions from Alexandria to Hispania. His attempts to rebuild the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, a project intended to theologically disprove Christian prophecy about its eternal desolation, famously faltered, with reports of earthquakes and mysterious fires halting construction. The people of Antioch, a sophisticated, cosmopolitan, and largely Christian city, openly mocked his beard, his austere personal habits, and his lofty philosophical paganism, preferring their chariot races and theatrical shows to his learned sermons. His intellectual, virtue-focused paganism failed to capture the popular imagination that the simpler, more emotional, and spiritually accessible appeal of Christianity held for the masses. He was a man trying to rebuild a beautiful, intricate vase that had already been shattered. He could piece it together, but the cracks were everywhere, and it could no longer hold water. The spirit of the age had moved on. His crusade ended, as so many Roman stories do, on a dusty, sun-baked battlefield in Mesopotamia in 363, during a massive and ambitious campaign against the powerful Persian Sassanid Empire. Julian was mortally wounded in a skirmish. The accounts of his death, written by both friends and enemies, are layered with legend and conflicting detail. Some said he was struck by a Persian cavalry spear, others that he was assassinated by a Christian in his own ranks, a final act of the political violence that had defined his life from its very beginning. What is more reliably recorded is that, as he lay dying in his tent, he gathered his philosophers and military companions for one final, sorrowful discourse. He reportedly said, to the Neoplatonist philosopher Maximus, "You have one, O Galilean, a poignant, if likely apocryphal, acknowledgement of the victory of the faith of Jesus of Nazareth." And then, the philosopher Emperor, the last pagan ruler of Rome, was gone. He was only 31 years old. His death was not just the end of a man, but the end of an idea, the final, failed attempt to restore the classical world. The door to that world, which he had struggled with such immense personal energy and conviction to keep open, swung shut with a final, quiet thud. His life was a testament to the power of an idea to shape a single human destiny, and his failure. For sometimes, it was not an idea that vanished, but an entire body of men, thousands of souls, dissolving into the fog of history, leaving behind only questions etched in stone and silence. It is a mystery not of a single battle, but of silence. To understand the weight of this disappearance, we must first understand what a Roman legion was. It was not merely a large military unit. It was part of the early invasions of Britannia under the Emperor Claudius, suffering famously at the hands of Boudicca's rebels in 60 or 61 AD, when nearly the entire infantry complement was massacred. It was rebuilt, reinforced, and persevered. It earned its cognomen, Hispana *, for service in Spain. For over a century, its name appears in inscriptions, on military diplomas granting citizenship to retired veterans, on altars dedicated to Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, for victories granted. It was a permanent fixture in the Roman military machine, a thread woven into the very fabric of the empire. And then, one day, the thread was cut. The last certain datable evidence of the 9th Legion's existence comes from an inscription on a stone found at the fortress of Ebracum, modern-day York in northern Britain. The inscription records the legion's involvement in rebuilding the fortress's gates in stone, a sign of permanent occupation and pride. This stone is dated to the reign of the Emperor Trajan, around 108 AD. For decades, the 9th was a key part of the northern garrison in Britannia, the tumultuous province that had been the making and unmaking of many Roman careers. They were the bulwark against the untamed tribes of the north, the Picts and the Caledonians, who lived beyond the frontier that would one day become Hadrian's wall. The world of the 9th was the world we explored in our first segment. The damp fortresses, the long patrols, the routine of drill and construction. And then, within a decade or two of that stone being carved in York, the 9th Legion vanishes from the historical record. It is not mentioned again. The question is, what happened in the misty hills of Britannia, or perhaps on some distant frontier, to erase this entire community of men from the pages of history? The most popular and romantic theory, the one that fuels novels and films, is that the 9th was annihilated in Britain. The idea is that it marched north from York into the fog-shrouded lands of Caledonia on a campaign to subdue the rebellious tribes, and was simply wiped out. The entire legion, over 5,000 heavily armed men, along with their auxiliaries, cavalry, and camp followers, a total force perhaps numbering 10,000 souls, ambushed and destroyed to the last man. It is a compelling image, a lost battle in a rain-swept Scottish glen, the last standard falling into the mud, the final echoes of Latin war cries swallowed by the wind. This theory draws some support from the Roman historian Cassius Dio, who writes of serious military setbacks in Britain during the reign of the Emperor Hadrian, around 117 to 119 AD. He mentions that the Romans suffered heavy losses, though he does not name a specific legion. The subsequent construction of Hadrian's Wall beginning in 122 AD can be seen as a direct response to such a catastrophe, a decision to abandon conquest and solidify a defensive frontier, a tacit admission that the North could not be tamed. The silence following these events, the The absence of the ninth from all later military dispatches and building inscriptions in Britain seems to point to a dramatic and tragic end. But let us explore this theory slowly, methodically, as one might ponder a difficult text. The complete annihilation of a legion was an event of such seismic shock to the Roman world that it was rarely, if ever, kept entirely quiet. The disaster of the Teutoburg forest in 09 AD, where 3 legions under Varus were destroyed, echoed for generations. The Emperor Augustus was said to have wandered his palace, crying Quinctilius Varus, "Give me back my legions." If the ninth had been wiped out in Britain, would it not have left a more explicit scar in the historical record? Would a historian like Dio not have named the legion as Tacitus named the legions lost with Varus? The evidence is circumstantial. There is no mass grave, no site of a final battle that can be conclusively linked to the ninth. The archaeology of northern Britain shows evidence of conflict and burning at some Roman forts from this period, but it does not point to a single, cataclysmic event that destroyed a legion. The theory of annihilation in Britain is a ghost, felt more than seen, its presence inferred from the silence that followed. This leads us to a second, perhaps less dramatic but equally plausible, theory: transfer and gradual dissolution. The Roman army was a mobile force, and legions were frequently moved from one trouble spot to another. The Ninth Legion, a veteran unit, could have been withdrawn from Britain by the Emperor Hadrian to reinforce his armies in the east, where he was preparing for or engaged in a war against the Jewish rebellion, the Bar Kokhba revolt. From 132 to 136 AD, this was a massive, brutal conflict that required a huge concentration of Roman military power. Perhaps the ninth was sent there. There is a tiny, fragmentary piece of evidence that places a Legio 9 in Judea around this time, but the fragment is so small, the context so lost, that it is impossible to be sure it was the *Hispana* and not another Ninth Legion, which did briefly exist. If it was there, it could have been worn down in the grueling, guerrilla-style warfare of the Judean hills, its numbers depleted in a dozen small, unrecorded skirmishes until it was no longer combat effective. Alternatively, it could have been sent to the Danube frontier, another perpetually contested border. The theory here is that the legion was not destroyed in a single glorious battle, but was gradually bled white over years of campaigning its ranks, not filled with new recruits, until it was finally disbanded, its remaining men folded into other units. Its end was not a bang, but a whimper, bureaucratic decision, an administrative fading away. Now, let us consider the third, and in many ways most fascinating, angle of this mystery: the bureaucratic paper trail. The Roman state was a state of records. It kept meticulous accounts. The disappearance of a legion would not have been a simple matter of it failing to return from a patrol. It would have been a complex process of administrative death. We can imagine the scrolls in Rome, the office of a procurator perhaps, a clerk, his hand stained with ink, updating the vast imperial ledgers. He consults a list, the *Notitia Dignitatum*, a record of military units and their stations. Next to * Legio 9 Hispana*, there is an entry. Then, 1 year, there is a notation. Perhaps it is marked for transfer. The following year, the entry remains, but no new location is listed. The year after that, the line for the ninth is simply blank. Or, perhaps, a new legion, the sixth *Victrix*, is recorded as taking its place at the fortress in York. There is no single document that says the Ninth Legion was destroyed. Instead, there is a slow cessation of mentions. It stops appearing on the military diplomas issued to retiring soldiers. It ceases to dedicate altars. Its number is never raised again as a new formation, as was sometimes done with legions that had been disgraced. The bureaucracy, so meticulous in recording its life, simply stops recording it. The void it leaves is not filled with drama, but with administrative silence. This is the true nature of the mystery. It is a puzzle defined by a lack of paperwork. We must also consider the human dimension of this silence. Imagine the families back in the veterans' colonies in Italy or in Spain. The letters from a son or a husband, stationed in far off Britannia, suddenly stop arriving. At first, there is worry, but not panic. The post is slow. The weather has delayed ships. But as months turn into years, the worry curdles into a dull, accepted grief. There is no body to bury, no story to mourn. There is only the absence, For the comrades of the 9th who had retired before the disappearance, the veterans who had settled on land grants near York or Lincoln, the fate of their old unit would have been a subject of grim speculation in their twilight years. They would have heard rumors of a great disaster in the north, or talk of the Legion being sent to the deserts of the east, but they would never know for sure. The fate of their friends, their standard, their legacy, became a story told in fragments, a memory that slowly faded with each passing generation, until the 9th Legion itself became little more than a name on a few scattered stones, a ghost in the machine of history. The mystery of the 9th is ultimately a mirror. We look into the silence of the past, and we see our own fascination with the lost and the unknown. The dramatic theory of annihilation in the Scottish mists appeals to our sense of tragedy and romance. The theory of transfer and gradual dissolution appeals to our understanding of institutional decay and the impersonal grind of history. The bureaucratic theory appeals to our modern awareness of how systems function and how information can be lost, not in fire, but in filing. The truth is likely a combination of these, lost to us forever. The 9th Legion, whether it fell in a single, terrible day or was slowly dissolved into the vastness of the empire, remains one of history's great, quiet enigmas. It is a reminder that the past is not a fully illuminated room, but a landscape dotted with pools of light, between which stretch vast, dark, and silent spaces, where legions and their stories can disappear without a trace. The fate of the 9th Legion is a mystery born from the vast, impersonal machinery of the Roman military, a machinery that, in times of peace, was governed not from the battlefield, but from the writing desk. And it is to the world of the bureaucrat, to the quiet hum of administration in a provincial capital, that we now turn. As we linger on the fate of the 9th, it is worth stepping back to consider the Legion, not just as a military unit, but as a living community. Within its ranks were clerks and engineers, surgeons and surveyors, veterinarians for the cavalry horses, and priests who interpreted the will of the gods from the flight of birds or the entrails of a sacrificed sheep. Each of these men had a story, a life that extended beyond the parade ground. Some may have had local wives or families in the *vicus*, the civilian settlement that inevitably grew like a shadow outside the fortress walls at York. The disappearance of the Legion, therefore, was not just the loss of a fighting force, it was the dissolution of an entire micro-society. The vibrant, noisy, smelly, and multifaceted world of the fortress would have fallen into a profound silence, leaving the civilians in the *vicus*, bewildered, then worried, and ultimately abandoned. What became of them? Did they slowly pack up and leave, or did they wait, for years, hoping for news that never came? This human dimension, the ripple effect on the non-combatants, is a quieter, more intimate part of the same mystery. Let us also consider the political context of the era. The Emperor Hadrian, who came to power in 117 AD, inherited an empire that had been aggressively expanded by his predecessor Trajan. Hadrian's policy was one of consolidation. He famously relinquished some of Trajan's eastern conquests and began building his wall in Britain, a physical manifestation of a new, defensive imperial strategy. In such a strategic shift, the fate of a single legion could be seen as a pragmatic calculation. If the 9th had been severely mauled in a northern campaign, perhaps its destruction was the very catalyst that convinced Hadrian of the need for a fixed, defensible frontier. Conversely, if it was simply under strength and worn out, its disbandment would have fit perfectly with a general streamlining of the military, a reallocation of resources to more volatile frontiers. The Legion's Vanishing Act coincides precisely with this pivotal moment of imperial retrenchment. It became, willingly or not, a piece on the strategic chessboard, sacrificed or moved for the greater stability of the empire. Its story is thus inextricably linked to the grand, geopolitical decisions being made in Rome. Decisions made by a man who never saw the mists of Britannia but whose will shaped its landscape for centuries. Furthermore, we must address the tantalizing, though faint, echoes from the east. Beyond the fragmentary inscription in Judea, there is a later, curious list from the mid-2nd century called the Noticia Gigni Tatun, which catalogues military units across the empire. While the version we have is from a much later period, it is believed to contain older information. In it, a Legio X is listed as being stationed in the Netherlands, This has led to a minor theory that the core of the Ninth was transferred from Britain not to the east, but to the lower Rhine Delta, and was eventually destroyed or disbanded there, perhaps during a local rebellion or a Frankish incursion. This theory is problematic, as it is difficult to reconcile the timeline with the Legion's disappearance from Britain, but it illustrates a key point. The mystery is so compelling that even the faintest of clues can generate entire new avenues of speculation. Each potential sighting, like a supposed ghost, keeps the memory of the Legion alive long after its physical presence had faded. The allure of the Lost Legion has, of course, permeated modern culture. It has been the subject of novels, television series, and films, most of which understandably favor the dramatic and cinematic theory of annihilation in the misty highlands of Scotland. This popular incarnation has, in a way, given the Ninth Legion a second life. It has become a symbol of the ultimate unknown, of the romance of a doomed and forgotten army. While these fictional accounts take great liberties with the historical facts, they speak to a deep human fascination with the unresolved. We are drawn to stories without endings, to questions without answers. The Ninth Legion provides a perfect vessel for this fascination, a historical blank space that our imagination feels compelled to fill. In the end, after all the theories have been laid out, and all the fragments of evidence gently examined, we are left with a simple, profound truth. We do not know, and perhaps we will never know. The mystery of the Ninth Legion is a monument to the limits of our historical knowledge. For all our archaeology, our critical reading of ancient texts, and our logical deductions, the past retains the power to keep its secrets. The 5,000 men of the Legionary Hispana marched from the pages of history into the fog, and the fog closed behind them. Their story is a quiet reminder of the transience of even the most powerful institutions, and of the countless individual lives that are swallowed by the slow, patient passage of time. It is a story not of noise and drama, but of a deep and enduring silence, a silence we can only approach with respect and a contemplative wonder. As we prepare to leave the mystery of the Ninth Legion, it is worthwhile to sit with the nature of its legacy. For the Romans who came after, the absence of the Hispana likely became a piece of administrative trivia, a closed file in the vast imperial archives. But for us, looking back across the centuries, it has become something else entirely. It serves as a poignant reminder that history is not a continuous, unbroken narrative, but a tapestry woven from countless individual threads, many of which have frayed and snapped, leaving gaps that logic cannot always fill. Consider the very landscape they once occupied. The great legionary fortress at Eboracum, modern-day York, did not lie empty. It was soon occupied by the 6th Legion, Victrix, the victorious, which became the new permanent garrison. Life in the Vicus, would have resumed, adapting to the new masters. The local merchants who once sold wine and pottery to soldiers of the 9th now sold the same goods to soldiers of the 6th. For them, the change was likely a practical matter. The face of the empire changed, but its presence remained. The memory of the previous occupants would have faded within a generation. Their names forgotten, their personalities dissolved into the generic idea of the soldiers who were here before. The relentless continuity of daily life often smooths over such ruptures, no matter how profound they may seem to later historians. This leads us to a final, philosophical contemplation. The disappearance of the Ninth Legion forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge. We are accustomed to seeking answers, to filling in blanks with data and reasoned hypotheses, but some blanks remain stubbornly empty. The story of the Ninth teaches us the value of dwelling in that uncertainty, of accepting that the past does not owe us all its secrets. This acceptance is not a failure of scholarship, but a form of respect for the sheer scale of time and the fragility of human records. It is a gentle admonition against the arrogance of believing we can ever fully reconstruct a world that is gone. The Legion's most enduring monument, then, is not a stone wall or a carved inscription, but the question mark itself. It has ensured that the Legionary Hispana is far more famous in disappearance than it ever was during its long and mostly unremarkable service. Its standard is no longer a physical eagle of silver or gold, but a symbol of all that is lost and unknowable in the human story. It represents the common soldier whose name is not on any monument, the small, daily events that were never recorded, the countless stories that ended without a finale. In its silence, the Ninth Legion speaks for all the silent voices of the past. So, we allow the mystery to settle. We release the need for a definitive answer and simply observe the void where the Legion once stood. We can picture the empty barracks at Ebrachem, the unwalked patrol route along a future wall, the unwritten letters home, and in that quiet, contemplative space, the story finds its own kind of resolution, not as a solved puzzle, but as a permanent, and strangely peaceful, historical reverie. The silent, enigmatic fate of a legion is a powerful reminder that the Roman Empire was built as much on mystery as on might. And while the legions held the frontiers, the immense task of governing the peaceful provinces fell to a different class of man, not the soldier with his sword, but the administrator with his stylus and scroll. It is to his world, to the quiet, paper-strewn office of a provincial governor, that we now turn. From the echoing silence of a lost legion, we now travel to a world defined not by silence, but by the constant, soft rustle of papyrus. We leave behind the damp frontier and step into the sunlit, colonnaded courtyards of a provincial capital, perhaps in Gallia Narbonensis or Hispania Baetica. Here, the essence of Rome was not maintained by the sharp point of a asterisk pilum, asterisk, but by the sharpened tip of a stylus. This is the world of the provincial governor, and if you imagine this life was one of endless banquets and effortless authority, you may find the reality to be different. It was a life of immense, often tedious, responsibility. Imagine yourself now, not as a soldier bearing the weight of a pack, but as a senator, recently appointed by the emperor himself to govern a peaceful province. You have arrived with your staff, your asterisk cohors amicorum asterisk, a group of secretaries, legal advisors, and young aristocratic protégés. Your official residence, the asterisk praetorium asterisk, is a spacious villa within the city, a symbol of Roman order and your own status. But your days are not spent in leisurely contemplation of the gardens. They are consumed by the ledger and the law. The first thing that would strike you is the sheer volume of paper. Scrolls and wax tablets are piled high on desks, carried by scurrying scribes from dawn until dusk. This is the administrative engine of the empire, and you are its conductor. Your primary duty, the one that took up most of your waking hours, was that of a judge. You were the chief justice of the province. Your asterisk, conventus asterisk, the assize court, would travel to major cities in a set circuit. Imagine the scene in the basilica of a provincial town. You sit on a raised dais, wearing the formal asterisk toga, praetexta asterisk. Before you, a long line of cases awaits. There is no jury. The weight of each decision rests solely on your shoulders. The cases are dizzyingly varied. A dispute between two local landowners over the boundary of a field and the water rights from a stream. A complex inheritance case involving a wealthy merchant's will and the claims of his estranged children. A petition from a city council concerning the repair of an aqueduct. A charge of banditry brought against a group of men from a hill village. You must listen to the advocates. Examine whatever evidence exists, soften just witnessed testimony, consult your legal advisors, and render a verdict. The lives and fortunes of people you have never met before are placed in your hands, day after day after day. The law, the immense, intricate edifice of Roman law, is your constant companion and your heaviest burden. Beyond the courtroom, your role was that of a chief executive officer. The financial health of the province was your direct concern. A constant stream of reports from the asterisk procurator, asterisk, the emperor's financial agent, would cross your desk. These detailed the collection of taxes, the tribute in grain, the customs duties at ports, the poll tax. You had to ensure this flow of revenue to Rome was steady and efficient, but also that it did not provoke unrest through excessive greed. You reviewed the budgets for public works, the maintenance of roads and bridges, the construction of new markets, the upkeep of public baths. A governor was judged by his predecessor's legacy in stone and mortar. You authorized expenditures, signed off on contracts for local contractors, and dealt with the inevitable complaints about cost overruns and delays. It was a role that required the mind of an accountant and the patience of a diplomat. Your life was also one of immense social, ritual, and political theater. While you may have longed for a quiet evening with a book of philosophy, your position demanded constant visibility. You were expected to host formal receptions for the local elite, the wealthy landowners and retired military officers who formed the backbone of Roman influence in the region. These dinners were not merely social, they were exercises in political intelligence and alliance building. You would recline on a couch, eating roasted dormice and dates, making polite conversation, listening for whispers of discontent or loyalty. You presided over public games and religious festivals, sacrificing a white bull to Jupiter for the emperor's health. Your every movement observed for signs of piety or impiety. Even your leisure was a form of work. Your personal conduct was a document for all to read, and a negative report from a rival or a disgruntled local could find its way to Rome, ending your career. And throughout it all, you were writing. Your stylus was almost an extension of your hand. You wrote detailed periodic reports to the emperor and the Senate. These were not simple summaries. They were elaborate, carefully crafted documents meant to showcase your competence and loyalty. You had to describe the province's status, any minor disturbances, the morale of the troops stationed nearby, the success of the harvests. You had to justify your major legal decisions and your administrative actions. Every word was weighed, every phrase considered for how it might be interpreted by a suspicious emperor or a jealous rival in the capital. The pressure was immense. A misstep, a poorly worded phrase, could be catastrophic. The gilded cage of the Praetorium was, in its way, as confining as the barracks on Hadrian's wall. Your battle was not against a physical enemy, but against administrative chaos, political intrigue, and the relentless, grinding passage of paperwork. This was the other pillar of the Roman peace. For every legionary holding the line on a windswept wall, there was a governor in a comfortable villa, holding the line with ink and law. It was a symbiotic relationship between the sword and the scroll, both essential, both grinding in their own ways. Beyond the public duties and the courtroom dramas, the governor's life was shaped by a constant, low hum of logistical concerns. His officium his personal staff, was a small bureaucracy in itself, and managing it was a task of its own. These were not faceless clerks, but men of varying ambition and ability, young military tribunes on their first posting, eager for a taste of administration, freedmen's secretaries whose literacy made them powerful, and trusted slaves who handled his most sensitive correspondence. The governor had to be a manager of men, understanding their strengths, their weaknesses, and their personal rivalries. A lazy or dishonest accountant could embezzle funds, causing a scandal that would end a career. A careless scribe could introduce a critical error into a report to the emperor. The smooth functioning of this miniature court was a reflection of his own competence. His relationship with the local population was another delicate balancing act. He was the embodiment of Roman power, yet he relied entirely on the cooperation of the local elite to govern effectively. These were the men who sat on the city councils, the decuriones who were responsible for collecting taxes and maintaining order in their own municipalities. A governor could not simply command them. He had to persuade, cajole, and sometimes flatter them. He had to navigate their ancient local feuds and their intricate social networks, which were often invisible to an outsider. A decision in favor of one prominent family in a legal case could alienate another. He had to be a student of local politics, learning the landscape of influence and obligation that was never written on any official map. His success was measured not just in quiet provinces and full treasuries, but in the subtle, unspoken respect he garnered from these local power brokers. And then there was the sheer isolation of the role. Despite being constantly surrounded by people, petitioners, staff, guards, and dinner guests, a governor could feel profoundly alone. He was far from Rome, from the center of political life, from the familiar sights and sounds of his own home. News was delayed by weeks or even months, He could never be sure if his actions were being well received or if a rival was undermining his reputation in the salons of the Palatine Hill. This isolation was compounded by the weight of his ultimate responsibility. He was the representative of the emperor. Every decision he made, every word he spoke in public, was seen as an expression of the imperial will. A misjudgment wasn't just a personal failure, it was a potential stain on the emperor's authority. This constant pressure to be perfect, to be Roman, to be just, and to be strong, was a psychological burden that no amount of luxury could fully alleviate. Amidst this, his personal pleasures were few and often ritualized. His reading was likely confined to legal texts and official correspondence. The philosophical texts he might have enjoyed in his youth gathered dust. His meals, though elaborate, were functions of state. Even his walks in the villa's garden were likely undertaken with a companion discussing provincial business. The concept of private life was almost entirely subsumed by his public duty. The gilded cages of his residence were beautiful, but they were still cages. The freedom of a common soldier to grumble in a tavern in the *Vix*, or to share a simple meal with his *concubinium*, was a freedom the governor had long since sacrificed. Yet, for all its burdens, the role was a pinnacle of a Roman aristocrat's career. It was an opportunity to leave one's mark, to inscribe one's name not on a battlefield, but on the very fabric of a province. A well-built bridge, a justly administered law, an efficiently managed grain supply that averted a famine. These were the legacies of a successful governor. He was a civilizing force, the agent of the *Pax Romana, in its most tangible form. While the legions ensured the peace through fear and force, the governor made it meaningful through law, order, and infrastructure. He made the Roman peace something that could be lived in, day by day, by millions of people who would never see a legionary or the emperor. His was the grind of civilization itself, the slow, patient, unglamorous work of building a world that functioned. And so, as the oil lamps in his study burned late into the night, illuminating the scrolls spread across his desk, the governor continued his work. The scratch of his stylus on wax was the sound of the empire functioning. It was a sound of order, of routine, of a system so vast and complex that it required the constant, dedicated attention of its most educated men. It was a different kind of service, a different kind of sacrifice, but it was, in its own quiet way, just as essential as the service of the soldier on the wall. Both were dedicated to the same idea, the preservation and perpetuation of Rome. And so, we have journeyed from the physical grind of the legionary to the philosophical crusade of an emperor, into the silent mystery of a lost legion, and finally, into the paper-strewn, responsibility-laden world of the governor, each a different facet of the same vast, intricate world. As the seasons turned in the province, the governor's life became a microcosm of the empire itself, a cycle of audit, assessment, and administration. The calendar was not his own, but was dictated by the rhythmic demands of the state. The arrival of the tax season brought a new intensity to the paperwork, as scrolls detailing the harvests of wheat, olive oil, and wine from every district were compiled and cross-referenced. Then came the logistical challenge of organizing the shipment of the unknown, the grain tax, to the nearest port for its journey to feed the city of Rome or a distant legion on the frontier. This was not abstract economics. It was the meticulous coordination of carts, sailors, and storage facilities. A single broken link in the chain potentially leading to shortage and discontent hundreds of miles away. His public appearances, too, were part of this unending cycle. The dedication of a new temple, the opening of a repaired aqueduct, the celebration of the emperor's birthday, which was a carefully staged event to reinforce Roman identity and his own place within its hierarchy. He would don his formal toga, a heavy and cumbersome garment, and deliver a speech crafted by his most eloquent Greek secretary, full of rhetorical flourishes praising the emperor and the benefits of Roman rule. The local populace would cheer, but the governor would be acutely aware of the watching eyes of the local elite, judging his every word and gesture. These performances were a necessary fiction, a display of unity and control that papered over the complex, often messy realities of provincial life. In the rare moments of true solitude, perhaps looking out from his balcony over the twinkling lights of the provincial capital at night, a governor might have reflected on the strange nature of his power. He commanded no legions here, yet his word could condemn a man to the mines or elevate a family to prominence. He lived in luxury, Yet he was a servant of the emperor, of the law, and of the immense, impersonal idea of Rome. His name might be remembered on an inscription, a line of text on a marble plaque that would, in centuries to come, be weathered by rain and studied by historians. But the true substance of his governorship, the thousands of judgments, the resolved disputes, the managed crises, the quiet, grinding work of governance would fade, just as the memory of the 9th Legion had faded. He was another cog in the machine, essential yet replaceable, powerful yet constrained. This was the ultimate paradox of his position. He was one of the most powerful men in the province, yet his freedom was circumscribed by law, tradition, and the ever-watchful eye of Rome. His life was one of privilege, but it was a privilege earned through relentless intellectual labor and immense stress. The comforts of his villa were not merely for enjoyment, they were the fuel that sustained him for his duties. The fine wine served at his table was a brief respite, not an end in itself. For tomorrow, the scrolls would be waiting, the petitioners would be gathering at his gates, and the relentless business of empire would begin again. And so, the world of the Roman governor comes into focus, not as a pageant of power, but as a deeply human story of responsibility. It was a life of negotiating the space between absolute authority and practical limitation, between the grandeur of Rome and the particularities of a local community. It was a life of words, of wax and papyrus, of subtle influence and patient, painstaking effort. The sword of the legionary had conquered the province, but it was the governor's stylus that truly ruled it, inscribing the daily reality of the Roman peace, one careful, deliberate word at a time. And so, we have journeyed fully through the layers of the Roman world, from the physical grind of the legionary on the wall, to the philosophical crusade of an emperor, into the silent mystery of a lost legion, and finally, into the paper-strewn, responsibility-laden world of the governor, each a different facet of the same vast, intricate, and enduring civilization. Let us imagine a single, unexceptional day in the life of a governor to truly appreciate the texture of his existence. The day begins before dawn, not with the crowing of a rooster, but with the soft, shuffling steps of his slave, the asterisk nomenclator asterisk, whose job it is to remember the names of every important person in the province. The slave whispers the day's agenda as the governor dresses, a litany of names and cases that will soon fill the hours. The first light of dawn filters through the slats of the wooden shutters, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the still air of the bedroom. He does not break his fast with a lavish meal, but with a simple piece of bread dipped in wine, perhaps a few olives. His stomach, too, must be prepared for the work ahead. The morning is dedicated to the asterisk salutatio, asterisk, a formal morning reception inherited from Roman tradition but transplanted to the provinces. The atrium of his residence is crowded. A line of people waits, each hoping for a moment of his time. There are local dignitaries paying their respects, a necessary formality. But there are also supplicants, a merchant whose shipment was seized by the port authorities, a village elder complaining about the requisition of their mules by a passing military unit, a father seeking a minor legal favor for his son. The governor does not speak to all of them directly. His asterisk, officium asterisk, filters the crowd. A secretary takes down names and petitions on wax tablets, triaging the flow of human need and ambition. The governor might grant a brief audience to a few, a nod, a few words of assurance. His face is a mask of calm authority, but his mind is already categorizing, prioritizing, storing away these problems for later in the day. This daily ritual is less about solving problems and more about being seen to be accessible, a performance of approachability that is vital for maintaining the illusion of a personal connection to a vastly impersonal power. By the third hour, the court is in session. The basilica is a cavernous space, its high ceiling amplifying the sounds. The rustle of clothing, the nervous cough of a plaintiff, the steady, droning voice of an advocate. The governor takes his seat on the asterisk cella curulus asterisk, the ivory inlaid chair that is the symbol of his judicial power. The first case is a tedious property dispute. Two brothers, their faces set in identical masks of stubborn resentment, argue over a strip of land no wider than 2 ox. The details are mind-numbingly complex, involving the testimony of aging, forgetful neighbors and a faded, ambiguous land survey. The governor listens, his chin resting on his hand. This is not the lofty jurisprudence of the great legal minds in Rome. This is the petty, grinding stuff of human conflict. Yet, To these two brothers, it is everything. His verdict, whatever it is, will create a lifelong enemy and, if he is lucky, a grudgingly satisfied citizen. He must weigh the evidence, but also the potential for future trouble. A decision seen as unjust could fester, turning a family quarrel into a local grievance against Roman rule itself. The law is not an abstract concept here. It is a tool for maintaining a fragile social peace. The afternoon brings a different kind of labor. He retreats to his private study, the *TABLINUM*, where the piles of papyrus await. Here, the sounds of the public world fade, replaced by the soft scratch of his own stylus and the quiet breathing of his scribes. Now, he must become a correspondent, a letter to a fellow governor in a neighboring province, coordinating the pursuit of a band of brigands who move across the provincial border, a delicate missive to the *procurator*, the emperor's financial agent, questioning an item in the provincial accounts, a task requiring immense tact, as the *procurator* reported directly to the emperor and could be a dangerous rival. And then, the most important document of all, his monthly report to the emperor. This is not a simple list of activities. It is a literary and political performance. He must demonstrate his vigilance and competence without appearing to boast. He must report minor disturbances without causing alarm. He must frame his requests for resources or guidance as signs of his diligent adherence to imperial policy, not his own indecisiveness. He chooses each word with the care of a poet, for his future may depend on the impression these words create in the mind of a man 1,000 miles away. The physicality of this work is often overlooked. The papyrus is coarse, the ink can smudge, the light from the oil lamp is flickering and weak. His eyes grow tired from reading the cramped, cursive script of his subordinates. A headache blooms behind his temples, born of concentration and the stuffy air of the room. This is the unglamorous reality of power, a sore back, tired eyes, and the faint, metallic smell of ink that seems to permeate his clothing and his skin. Later, there is a scheduled inspection of a new reservoir under construction on the city's outskirts. He rides in a simple carriage, a small retinue of lictors, carrying the facies *, the bundles of rods, and an axe that symbolized his authority clearing his path. At the site, he is met by the Greek engineer in charge. The man speaks quickly, pointing to diagrams, explaining the challenges of the aqueduct's gradient and the quality of the mortar. The governor nods, asking a few pertinent questions, demonstrating his engagement. He knows his presence alone, his show of interest, will expedite the project and discourage corruption. He picks up a trowel, presses it into a patch of fresh mortar, a symbolic gesture, a photo opportunity for the ancient world. The workers cheer, but their cheers are for the break in their labor his arrival has caused. He knows this, and he plays his part. The evening brings the only true respite, a private bath in the caldarium of his villa's private baths. The heat seeps into his muscles, loosening the knots of tension gathered in his shoulders and neck. For a few precious moments, in the steam-filled silence, he is not a governor, but simply a man, adrift in the warmth. But even this solitude is brief. Soon, he must prepare for the evening's cena, the formal dinner. The cena is another theater. The guest list has been carefully curated. The local high priest of the imperial cult is here, a vital ally in promoting loyalty to Rome, a wealthy shipowner whose cooperation is needed for the grain shipments, a visiting philosopher from Alexandria, whose conversation might provide a fleeting intellectual diversion. The couches are arranged in a U-shape, the governor taking the place of honor. The food is exquisite oysters from the northern coasts, a peacock served with its feathers meticulously reattached, dates stuffed with nuts, wine diluted with warm water and honey. But the governor eats little. He is working. He listens to the shipowner's complaints about piracy, offers a non-committal response to the high priest's request for funds for a new statue, and engages the philosopher in a discussion about Plato's Republic, a conversation that feels strangely abstract and distant from the realities of his day. As the last guest departs, well after dark, the governor finally stands alone in the atrium. The scent of wine and roasted meat hangs in the air. The slaves move quietly, extinguishing lamps and clearing the remnants of the feast. The silence is profound. He feels a deep, hollow exhaustion, a fatigue of the mind and spirit that sleep may not cure. He walks slowly to his bedroom, past the room where the scrolls for tomorrow are already waiting on a table. He lies down, but his mind continues to turn, replaying the day's conversations, worrying over tomorrow's decisions. The weight of the province is a blanket he cannot cast off. In the distance a dog barks, and the sound is achingly lonely. He is the most powerful man for hundreds of miles, yet in this moment he is utterly alone. A solitary administrator in the quiet heart of the empire, keeping the peace with a weary mind and a well-used stylus. And so, we have journeyed fully through the layers of the Roman world, from the physical grind of the legionary on the wall, to the philosophical crusade of an emperor, into the silent mystery of a lost legion, and finally, into the paper-strewn responsibility-laden and deeply human world of the governor, each a different facet of the same vast, intricate, and enduring civilization. Let us imagine a single, unexceptional day in the life of a governor to truly appreciate the texture of his existence. The day begins before dawn, not with the crowing of a rooster, but with the soft, shuffling steps of his slave, the asterisk nomenclator asterisk, whose job it is to remember the names of every important person in the province. The slave whispers the day's agenda as the governor dresses, a litany of names and cases that will soon fill the hours. The first light of dawn filters through the slats of the wooden shutters, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the still air of the bedroom. He does not break his fast with a lavish meal, but with a simple piece of bread dipped in wine, perhaps a few olives. His stomach, too, must be prepared for the work ahead. The morning is dedicated to the asterisk salutatio, asterisk, a formal morning reception inherited from Roman tradition but transplanted to the provinces. The atrium of his residence is crowded. A line of people waits, each hoping for a moment of his time. There are local dignitaries paying their respects, a necessary formality. But there are also supplicants, a merchant whose shipment was seized by the port authorities, a village elder complaining about the requisition of their mules by a passing military unit, a father seeking a minor legal favor for his son. The governor does not speak to all of them directly. His asterisk, officium asterisk, filters the crowd. A secretary takes down names and petitions on wax tablets, triaging the flow of human need and ambition. The governor might grant a brief audience to a few, a nod, a few words of assurance. His face is a mask of calm authority, but his mind is already categorizing, prioritizing, storing away these problems for later in the day. This daily ritual is less about solving problems and more about being seen to be accessible, a performance of approachability that is vital for maintaining the illusion of a personal connection to a vastly impersonal power. By the third hour, the court is in session. The basilica is a cavernous space, its high ceiling amplifying the sounds. The rustle of clothing, the nervous cough of a plaintiff, the steady, droning voice of an advocate. The governor takes his seat on the asterisk cella curulus asterisk, the ivory inlaid chair that is the symbol of his judicial power. The first case is a tedious property dispute. Two brothers, their faces set in identical masks of stubborn resentment, argue over a strip of land no wider than 2 ox. The details are mind-numbingly complex, involving the testimony of aging, forgetful neighbors and a faded, ambiguous land survey. The governor listens, his chin resting on his hand. This is not the lofty jurisprudence of the great legal minds in Rome. This is the petty, grinding stuff of human conflict. Yet, to these two brothers, it is everything. His verdict, whatever it is, will create a lifelong enemy and, if he is lucky, a grudgingly satisfied citizen. He must weigh the evidence, but also the potential for future trouble. A decision seen as unjust could fester, turning a family quarrel into a local grievance against Roman rule itself. The law is not an abstract concept here. It is a tool for maintaining a fragile social peace. The afternoon brings a different kind of labor. He retreats to his private study, the asterisk tablinum asterisk, where the piles of papyrus await. Here, the sounds of the public world fade, replaced by the soft scratch of his own stylus and the quiet breathing of his scribes. Now, he must become a correspondent, a letter to a fellow governor in a neighboring province, coordinating the pursuit of a band of brigands who move across the provincial border, a delicate missive to the asterisk procurator asterisk, the emperor's financial agent, questioning an item in the provincial accounts, a task requiring immense tact. As the asterisk procurator asterisk reported directly to the emperor and could be a dangerous rival. And then, the most important document of all, his monthly report to the emperor. This is not a simple list of activities. It is a literary and political performance. He must demonstrate his vigilance and competence without appearing to boast. He must report minor disturbances without causing alarm. He must frame his requests for resources or guidance as signs of his diligent adherence to imperial policy, not his own indecisiveness. He chooses each word with the care of a poet, for his future may depend on the impression these words create in the mind of a man 1,000 miles away. The physicality of this work is often overlooked. The papyrus is coarse, the ink can smudge, the light from the oil lamp is flickering and weak. His eyes grow tired from reading the cramped, cursive script of his subordinates. A headache blooms behind his temples, born of concentration and the stuffy air of the room. This is the unglamorous reality of power, a sore back, tired eyes, and the faint, metallic smell of ink that seems to permeate his clothing and his skin. Later, there is a scheduled inspection of a new reservoir under construction on the city's outskirts. He rides in a simple carriage, a small retinue of lictors, carrying the asterisk, facies asterisk, the bundles of rods, and an axe that symbolized his authority clearing his path. At the site, he is met by the Greek engineer in charge. The man speaks quickly, pointing to diagrams, explaining the challenges of the aqueduct's gradient and the quality of the mortar. The governor nods, asking a few pertinent questions, demonstrating his engagement. He knows his presence alone, his show of interest, will expedite the project and discourage corruption. He picks up a trowel, presses it into a patch of fresh mortar, a symbolic gesture, a photo opportunity for the ancient world. The workers cheer, but their cheers are for the break in their labor his arrival has caused. He knows this, and he plays his part. The evening brings the only true respite, a private bath in the caldarium of his Villa-S private baths. The heat seeps into his muscles, loosening the knots of tension gathered in his shoulders and neck. For a few precious moments, in the steam-filled silence, he is not a governor, but simply a man, adrift in the warmth. But even this solitude is brief. Soon, he must prepare for the evening's cena, the formal dinner. The cena is another theater. The guest list has been carefully curated. The local high priest of the imperial cult is here, a vital ally in promoting loyalty to Rome, a wealthy shipowner whose cooperation is needed for the grain shipments, a visiting philosopher from Alexandria, whose conversation might provide a fleeting intellectual diversion. The couches are arranged in a U-shape, the governor taking the place of honor. The food is exquisite oysters from the northern coasts, a peacock served with its feathers meticulously reattached, dates stuffed with nuts, wine diluted with warm water and honey. But the governor eats little. He is working. He listens to the shipowner's complaints about piracy, offers a non-committal response to the high priest's request for funds for a new statue, and engages the philosopher in a discussion about Plato's Republic, a conversation that feels strangely abstract and distant from the realities of his day. As the last guest departs, well after dark, the governor finally stands alone in the atrium. The scent of wine and roasted meat hangs in the air. The slaves move quietly, extinguishing lamps and clearing the remnants of the feast. The silence is profound. He feels a deep, hollow exhaustion, a fatigue of the mind and spirit that sleep may not cure. He walks slowly to his bedroom, past the room where the scrolls for tomorrow are already waiting on a table. He lies down, but his mind continues to turn, replaying the day's conversations, worrying over tomorrow's decisions. The weight of the province is a blanket he cannot cast off. In the distance a dog barks, and the sound is achingly lonely. He is the most powerful man for hundreds of miles, yet in this moment he is utterly alone, a solitary administrator in the quiet heart of the empire, keeping the peace with a weary mind and a well-used stylus. And so, we have journeyed fully through the layers of the Roman world, from the physical grind of the legionary on the wall, to the philosophical crusade of an emperor, into the silent mystery of a lost legion, and finally, into the paper-strewn, responsibility-laden, and deeply human world of the governor, each a different facet of the same vast, intricate, and enduring civilization. To truly appreciate the scale of the governor's task, we must consider the province not as a single entity, but as a collection of countless, interconnected systems, each requiring his oversight. Take, for example, the infrastructure of communication, the famed Roman roads. They were not merely paths for armies, they were the circulatory system of the empire, carrying information, trade, and tax revenue. The governor was responsible for their maintenance, This involved a constant stream of requests from local magistrates. A bridge had been weakened by a spring flood in a northern district. The paving stones on the Via Principalis leading to a key mining town were worn and hazardous to carts. Each request required an assessment. He had to consult maps, evaluate the cost from the provincial treasury against other priorities, and authorize the use of either local corvée labor or, if it was of military significance, detachments of legionary engineers. A single neglected road could isolate a community, stifle commerce, and slow the response to a crisis, making his oversight of stone and mortar a critical element of security and prosperity. His role also extended into the spiritual life of the province. As the chief representative of Roman state religion, he was the patron of the imperial cult. This was not an empty formality. The cult of the deified emperors was a powerful tool of political integration, binding the diverse and often fractious local populations to a central Roman ideal. He was expected to preside over the major ceremonies, to lead the sacrifices of bulls and sheep to the divine Augustus or the divine Trajan. The smell of burning fat and incense, the chant of the priests, the watching eyes of the populace sit was a profound piece of political theatre. His piety, or the perception of it, was a barometer of his loyalty. But he also had to navigate the delicate landscape of local deities. A wise governor did not suppress native gods. He assimilated them. He might provide funds for the restoration of a local temple to a Gallic healing god, recognizing that such a gesture fostered goodwill far more effectively than an edict. He walked a fine line between imposing Roman religious identity and respecting local traditions, understanding that faith was often the gateway to a people's loyalty. Within the confines of his own praetorium, the governor was also a master of a large and complex household. His familia. This included not only his personal slaves from the highly educated Greek Librarius who managed his correspondence, to the lowly Tanzo who cut his hair, but also his official staff. His cohors, amicorum This cohort of friends was a carefully selected group of young aristocrats, military tribunes, and legal experts. They were his eyes, ears, and brains. A talented legate in his cohort might be tasked with an independent mission to investigate corruption in a distant city. A sharp-minded young quaestor could be assigned to draft the initial verdict on a complex legal case. The governor had to be a judge of character, assigning tasks based on ability, while also balancing the political ambitions of these young men and their powerful families back in Rome. A mistake in delegation could lead to a disastrous decision being made in his name. The smooth functioning of his officium was a reflection of his own managerial skill, a small-scale model of the governance he exerted over the province itself. The financial pressures were relentless. The provincial treasury was not a bottomless pit. Revenues from taxes and customs duties had to be balanced against a long list of expenditures: military salaries for the auxiliary units under his command, subsidies for essential industries like the state-run mines, funds for public games and festivals, and the endless cost of infrastructure maintenance. He was under constant pressure from the local elites, the decuriones, to fund their pet projects, a new Odeon for musical performances, an expansion of the Forum. Denying these requests risked alienating the very class he relied upon to govern. Approving them all would bankrupt the province. Every decision was a calculation of political benefit versus financial cost. He had to be as skilled an economist as he was a jurist, his mind constantly occupied with columns of numbers and their implications for public order. And through all this, the specter of time loomed. A gubernatorial appointment was typically for 3 to 5 years. This was not a long time to master the intricacies of a foreign land, to build the necessary networks of influence, and to leave a lasting positive legacy. The first year was often spent in learning, the last year in preparing his defense of his actions for the Senate and the Emperor. The window for effective action was narrow. This created a certain frantic energy beneath the calm exterior. He knew that his successor might undo his policies, that a bridge he started might be left unfinished, that a legal reform he implemented might be overturned. The ephemeral nature of his impact must have been a source of quiet frustration, a reminder that he was merely a temporary steward in the long life of the empire. In his most private moments, perhaps looking at a map of the province spread across a table, he might have traced the lines of the rivers and roads with his finger. Each line represented a responsibility, a potential crisis, a community relying on the system he upheld. The weight was immense. He was the human interface between the abstract, glorious idea of Rome and the gritty reality of its farthest reaches. He ensured that the taxes were collected, that justice was however imperfectly administered, that the roads were open, and that the peace was kept. It was a life of immense privilege, but also of profound isolation and unyielding pressure. There were no triumphal arches for successful governors, only the quiet satisfaction of a province that remained peaceful, prosperous, and loyal. And as he finally retired for the night, the sounds of the provincial capital sleeping around him, that quiet satisfaction had to be enough. It was the reward for a day spent, and a life dedicated, to the meticulous, unheroic, and utterly essential work of empire. To truly appreciate the scale of the governor's task, we must consider the province not as a single entity, but as a collection of countless, interconnected systems, each requiring his oversight. Take, for example, the infrastructure of communication, the famed Roman roads. They were not merely paths for armies, they were the circulatory system of the empire, carrying information, trade, and tax revenue. The governor was responsible for their maintenance. This involved a constant stream of requests from local magistrates. A bridge had been weakened by a spring flood in a northern district. The paving stones on the Via Principalis leading to a key mining town were worn and hazardous to carts. Evaluate the cost from the provincial treasury against other priorities, and authorize the use of either local corvée labor or, if it was of military significance, detachments of legionary engineers. A single neglected road could isolate a community, stifle commerce, and slow the response to a crisis, making his oversight of stone and mortar a critical element of security and prosperity. His role also extended into the spiritual life of the province. As the chief representative of Roman state religion, he was the patron of the imperial cult. This was not an empty formality. The cult of the deified emperors was a powerful tool of political integration, binding the diverse and often fractious local populations to a central, Roman ideal. He was expected to preside over the major ceremonies, to lead the sacrifices of bulls and sheep to the divine Augustus or the divine Trajan. The smell of burning fat and incense, the chant of the priests, the watching eyes of the populace cit was a profound piece of political theatre. His piety, or the perception of it, was a barometer of his loyalty. But he also had to navigate the delicate landscape of local deities. A wise governor did not suppress native gods, he assimilated them. He might provide funds for the restoration of a local temple to a Gallic healing god, recognizing that such a gesture fostered goodwill far more effectively than an edict. He walked a fine line between imposing Roman religious identity and respecting local traditions, understanding that faith was often the gateway to a people's loyalty. Within the confines of his own praetorium, the governor was also a master of a large and complex household. His familiar. This included not only his personal slaves, from the highly educated Greek librarius who managed his correspondence, to the lowly tonzo who cut his hair, but also his official staff, his cohors, amicorum This cohort of friends was a carefully selected group of young aristocrats, military tribunes, and legal experts. They were his eyes, ears, and brains. A talented legate in his cohort might be tasked with an independent mission to investigate corruption in a distant city. A sharp-minded young quaestor could be assigned to draft the initial verdict on a complex legal case. The governor had to be a judge of character, assigning tasks based on ability, while also balancing the political ambitions of these young men and their powerful families back in Rome. A mistake in delegation could lead to a disastrous decision being made in his name. The smooth functioning of his officium was a reflection of his own managerial skill, a small-scale model of the governance he exerted over the province itself. The financial pressures were relentless. The provincial treasury was not a bottomless pit. Revenues from taxes and customs duties had to be balanced against a long list of expenditures. Military salaries for the auxiliary units under his command, subsidies for essential industries like the state-run mines, funds for public games and festivals, and the endless cost of infrastructure maintenance. He was under constant pressure from the local elites, the decuriones to fund their pet projects, a new Odeon for musical performances, an expansion of the Forum. Denying these requests risked alienating the very class he relied upon to govern. Approving them all would bankrupt the province. Every decision was a calculation of political benefit versus financial cost. He had to be as skilled an economist as he was a jurist, his mind constantly occupied with columns of numbers and their implications for public order. And through all this, the specter of time loomed. A gubernatorial appointment was typically for 3 to 5 years. This was not a long time to master the intricacies of a foreign land, to build the necessary networks of influence, and to leave a lasting positive legacy. The first year was often spent in learning, the last year in preparing his defense of his actions for the Senate and the Emperor. The window for effective action was narrow. This created a certain frantic energy beneath the calm exterior. He knew that his successor might undo his policies, that a bridge he started might be left unfinished, that a legal reform he implemented might be overturned. The ephemeral nature of his impact must have been a source of quiet frustration, a reminder that he was merely a temporary steward in the long life of the empire. In his most private moments, perhaps looking at a map of the province spread across a table, he might have traced the lines of the rivers and roads with his finger. Each line represented a responsibility, a potential crisis, a community relying on the system he upheld. The weight was immense. He was the human interface between the abstract, glorious idea of Rome and the gritty reality of its farthest reaches. He ensured that the taxes were collected, that justice was, however imperfectly administered, that the roads were open, and that the peace was kept. It was a life of immense privilege, but also of profound isolation and unyielding pressure. There were no triumphal arches for successful governors, only the quiet satisfaction of a province that remained peaceful, prosperous, and loyal. And as he finally retired for the night, the sounds of the provincial capital sleeping around him, that quiet satisfaction had to be enough. It was the reward for a day spent and a life dedicated to the meticulous, unheroic, and utterly essential work of empire. This was not merely a room, it was the institutional brain of the province. Here, on hundreds of scrolls, were stored copies of every edict. He issued every verdict, he passed every letter sent to and received from Rome, and the meticulous census data that dictated the tax burden for every piece of land and every head of a household. The air was thick with the smell of papyrus and cedar oil, used to protect the scrolls from insects. A dedicated slave, the ab actus *, the keeper of the records, would know the precise location of every document. Before making a ruling on a water rights dispute, the governor would have him pull the records from 20 years prior. The ink faded to brown, to see how his predecessor had adjudicated a similar case. This archive was his shield and his weapon. Its completeness was his defense against accusation, and its information was the bedrock of his power. He was, in a very real sense, the guardian of this paper reality, this second province that existed only in ink, which often held more sway than the physical world outside. His role as a cultural intermediary was another subtle, yet constant, demand. The province was a palimpsest, with the new Latin script of Rome written over the older, deeper scripts of local cultures. He had to navigate this carefully. In Gaul, he might be presented with a dispute that involved both Roman property law and ancient Celtic tribal custom. To ignore the local tradition was to invite resentment and be seen as a crude foreign imposer. To ignore Roman law was to fail in his duty. His task was to find a synthesis, to render a judgment that satisfied the letter of Roman law, while acknowledging the spirit of the local practice. He might, for instance, rule in favor of a Roman plaintiff in a land dispute, but order him to pay a compensatory sum to the defeated Gallic defendant, respecting a tribal concept of honor that Roman law did not recognize. This was the art of governance, to rule without seeming to crush, to Romanize through assimilation rather than annihilation. He was the lead actor in a long, slow play of cultural transformation, a process that required patience, perception, and a deep anthropological understanding of the people he governed. The management of the gubernatorial household itself was a microcosm of the empire's social order. The hierarchy was rigid and complex. At the top were his freeborn companions and military tribunes. Below them were his educated Greek secretaries, who might enjoy considerable informal influence. Further down were the skilled slaves, the cook, the masseur, the personal physician. At the bottom were the drudges, who cleaned the latrines and stoked the furnaces of the baths. Each of these individuals had their own networks, their own rivalries, and their own strategies for advancement. The governor had to be the master of this small world, aware of its tensions, or risk his domestic peace. A disgruntled cook could poison his food. A jealous secretary could lose a vital document. The smooth running of his home was a prerequisite for the smooth running of the province, and it required a daily investment of attention to the moods and machinations of the dozens of people who surrounded him. We have spoken of his correspondence with the emperor, but the web of his letters was far wider. He maintained a constant stream of communication with other governors, a network of peers who shared similar challenges. A letter might go to the governor of Tarraconensis, asking if a known troublemaker had crossed the border into his province. Another would be sent to the governor of Syria, inquiring about the latest diplomatic developments with Parthia, news that could affect the entire Eastern Empire. This was a republic of letters among the powerful, a system of mutual support and intelligence sharing that helped stabilize the empire. The composition of these letters was an art form. They were formal, filled with elaborate greetings and wishes for good health, but their substance was hard-nosed and practical. They were a lifeline, a reminder that he was not alone in his struggles, but part of a vast, dispersed brotherhood of administrators holding the world together. The physical and sensory experience of his role is also worth dwelling upon. The governor's world had a specific soundscape, the murmur of the crowd in the atrium during the asterisk, salutatio, asterisk, the solemn Latin of the courtroom advocates, the scratch of his own stylus in the quiet of the asterisk tablinum, asterisk, the cheerful but distant noise of a banquet from which he was mentally detached. His palate grew accustomed to the tastes of the province, the particular vintage of local wine, the type of olive oil, the fish sauce from a nearby port. His skin grew familiar with the textures of his office, the rough linen of his tunic under the heavy woolen toga, the smooth ivory of the asterisk celicurulus asterisk, the cool surface of a marble balustrade as he looked out over the city he governed. These sensory details were the wallpaper of his life, the unremarked-up background against which the drama of administration played out. They were the tangible proof of his immersion in this place, a constant, subtle reminder of where he was and who he had become. In his deepest reflections, the governor must have contemplated the nature of the system he served. The Roman Empire was a paradox, a republic in memory, a monarchy in fact, administered by an aristocracy. He was a product of this contradiction. He believed in the asterisk, mos maiorum, asterisk, the way of the ancestors. Yet he served an emperor whose power would have horrified those very ancestors. He upheld a legal system that promised justice, yet it was a justice that was often harsher to the poor and the non. He was a man caught between ideal and reality, between the philosophical principles he was taught in his youth and the pragmatic compromises required of his office. This cognitive dissonance was the ultimate, unspoken burden of his position. He could not afford to be a philosopher. He had to be a pragmatist. The success of his governorship was measured not in its adherence to perfect virtue, but in its maintenance of order and its steady flow of revenue. He was the human face of a vast, often impersonal and occasionally brutal, machine. He leaves not with a single emotion, but with a tapestry of feelings. There is affection for the landscape and some of its people, and a deep weariness with its endless problems. He has been changed by the province, just as he has changed it. He has left his mark in the stone of its buildings and the pages of its archives, and it has left its mark on his soul, instilling in him a knowledge of power and its limits that he could have learned nowhere else. He returns to Rome not as the man who left, but as a statesman tempered by fire, a man who has looked into the intricate, grinding, and profoundly human heart of the empire, and has done his part to keep its beat steady and strong. Listen to the soft whisper of the words, like a gentle breeze against a window pane, and allow your eyes to close, if they haven't already, giving yourself full permission to relax and to drift. Our story today begins with the gentle crunch of snow underfoot, a slow, rhythmic sound, crunch, and then silence, crunch, and then silence. Imagine you are walking through a deep, hushed forest. The world around you blanketed in a thick layer of fresh white snow. The air is cold, but still, so very still. Each tree branch is lined with a soft, white fur of frost, and the only light comes from the full moon above, casting a silvery blue glow upon the path. You are a traveling bard. Your name is Elian, and you are weary from your journey. Your cloak, a heavy wool of deep forest green, is dusted with snowflakes, and in your hand you carry your most treasured possession, a lute, its wood polished smooth by years of travel. You have been walking for hours, and the cold is beginning to seep through your boots. But then, through a break in the pine trees, you see it, a monastery. It sits nestled in a valley, a collection of stone buildings with a simple chapel, its windows dark but for a single, flickering glow. A thin grey wisp of smoke curls from a chimney, a promise of warmth. The path down to the heavy wooden gate is soft with snow, and as you approach, the only sound is the whisper of the wind, and the distant call of a single owl, a deep, soothing asterisk, who asterisk, that seems to echo the stillness. You lift the iron ring of the door knocker, and let it fall. The sound is not loud or harsh, but a deep, resonant asterisk, thud asterisk, that seems to be absorbed by the snow. For a moment, there is only silence. Then, the slow scraping of a wooden bar being lifted, and the great door swings inward, just enough to reveal a kindly aged face framed by a brown hood. The monk says nothing, but his eyes are warm. He sees your lute, your tired eyes, and he simply nods, stepping back to welcome you in. The moment you step inside, you are wrapped in a blanket of warmth, and a profound, deep silence. The air smells of old stone, of drying herbs, of beeswax candles and cold ashes. The only light comes from a single, large hearth at the far end of the great hall, where a fire crackles and pops softly, its orange light dancing on the stone walls, making the shadows sway and bend. The monk, whose name you learn is Brother Cedric, leads you to a wooden bench near the fire. He brings you a simple wooden bowl of warm broth and a piece of dark bread. The warmth of the bowl seeps into your hands, a comforting, grounding heat. You eat in silence, listening to the fire. A gentle asterisk crackle, pop, hiss, asterisk, the most ancient and soothing of lullabies. Brother Cedric gestures to a corridor. You may rest in the scriptorium, he whispers, his voice as soft as the rustle of his robes. It is the warmest room, beside the kitchen flue. You will not be disturbed. You nod your thanks, picking up your lute and following his direction. The scriptorium is a long, narrow room. A single high window allows a shaft of moonlight to fall upon a large wooden desk, covered in parchments and ink pots. All around, on high shelves, are books, great, heavy, leather-bound books. The air here is different. It carries the faint, sweet and sour scent of oak gall ink and the dry, papery smell of vellum. You set your lute down carefully on a cushioned stool and approach the desk, your curiosity, ever a bard's companion, stirring within you. In the pool of moonlight on the desk lies an open manuscript. The letters are beautifully formed, intricate and black, Latin prayers laid down with immense patience. But your eyes are drawn not to the words, but to the margins. There, in the same dark ink, is a world of whimsy and wonder. Alongside a solemn psalm, a tiny, detailed snail with a knight's helmet is charging toward the letter D. Beside a hymn, a rabbit is playing the pipes, its long ears flopping with the rhythm. In another corner, a fox in a monk's habit appears to be preaching to a flock of attentive chickens. These are the marginalia, the little secret jokes, the doodles, the bursts of imagination from the monks who spent their long, silent hours in this very room, copying these sacred texts. Their minds would wander, their hands would play, and they would leave these silent laughs, these whimsical thoughts, for future generations to discover. It was a way to stay sane, to bring a little bit of their own humanity into the solemn work. You run your finger gently over the drawing of the musical rabbit, and you smile. It feels like a secret shared across centuries. And then you see it. At the bottom of the page, nestled in the curl of a grand, illuminated letter O, is not a picture, but a series of small, neat marks. 5 lines, with little dots and tails on them. It is a musical staff, and on it are a sequence of notes, a forgotten melody, etched into the edge of this holy book, waiting for someone who could read its silent song. Your breath catches, gently, so gently, you pick up your lute. You settle back onto the floor, leaning against the warm stone wall beside the flue. The room is filled with a deep, resonant quiet, broken only by the soft, almost inaudible sigh of the wind outside. You close your eyes for a moment, letting your fingers find the strings. You don't pluck them yet. You simply rest your fingertips on the smooth, taut gut strings, feeling their potential for sound. In your mind's eye, you trace the notes on the page. You hear them in your head, a slow, meandering tune, a melody that sounds like falling snow, like quiet contemplation, like a secret too gentle to be spoken aloud. It is a simple tune, but it holds a profound peace within its rises and falls. It feels ancient and kind. And now, you begin to play. Your thumb softly brushes the lowest string, a deep, warm, vibrating asterisk asterisk that fills the silent room. The note hangs in the air, blending with the scent of old paper and the warmth from the stones. You let it fade almost completely before your fingers, moving as if on their own, find the next notes. The melody unfolds slowly, note by note, a musical whisper. There is no rhythm for dancing, no grand chorus for singing. This is a melody for listening, for dreaming. Each note is like a snowflake, landing softly in the quiet of the room, each one a perfect, peaceful moment. As you play, you can almost feel the presence of the monk who drew this so long ago. Was he a musician before he came here? Did he hum this tune as he worked in the garden? Was it a lullaby from his childhood? The melody speaks of simple things, of the first green shoots of spring after a long winter, of the comfort of a shared meal, of the quiet joy of a task well done. It is a song without words, and yet it tells the most universal story of all, the story of finding peace. The fire in the great hall has settled into a soft, pulsing glow. The moon outside your window has moved, its silver light now tracing a different path across the floor. Your fingers continue their gentle dance across the strings, the forgotten melody weaving a blanket of sound around you, a protective, soothing cocoon. The drawings in the margins seem to listen, the nightly snail, the piping rabbit, the preaching fox, all held in the spell of this rediscovered song. And as the final softest note fades into the warmth of the night, not ending, but simply drifting away like a sigh of contentment, you feel a deep and heavy peace settle over you. The lute rests softly in your lap. Your head leans back against the warm stone. And in the profound and gentle silence that follows the music, the world simply drifts away. The final note of the forgotten melody does not truly vanish. No. It simply changes form. It becomes the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Slow. And deep. And steady. The lute rests a comforting weight in your lap, and your hands feel loose and heavy, fingers still tingling with the ghost of the strings. The world around you has grown even softer, even more still, as if the entire monastery is holding its breath in reverence for the silence that follows the song. And in this deep, peaceful quiet, you begin to dream. Not a dreaming of sleep, but a waking dream. A gentle imagining that feels more real than the stone walls around you. The silver moonlight pouring through the high window seems to thicken, to become a tangible, shimmering pathway. And from the margins of the ancient manuscript, the little inked creatures begin to stir. The nightly snail slowly raises its visor, revealing two kindly dark eyes. It gives a tiny, courteous nod in your direction before continuing its slow, determined journey across the vast parchment landscape. There is no rush, only purpose. You can hear the soft, almost silent, she of its shell, sliding over the vellum. The rabbit with the pipes takes a deep breath, and though no sound comes from its drawn instrument, you can feel the melody you just played emanating from it. A vibration of joy that makes the air around it quiver. Its long foot taps a rhythm so slow it could be the heartbeat of the earth itself. Thump. Pause. Thump. Asterisk. And the fox in the monk's habit. He turns his pointed, clever face toward you. He does not speak, but a thought, clear and calm, forms in your mind. They believed. The thought whispers that the work of the hands was a prayer, that the careful forming of a letter, the grinding of ink, the patience of the scribe, was as holy as the spoken psalm. This melody was his prayer when words were not enough. This idea wraps around you like a soft blanket. The thought that creativity itself is a form of devotion, a quiet offering to the world. You feel the truth of it in your own tired hands, in the lute that gave voice to a silent prayer centuries old. There is no pressure here, only the gentle, endless cycle of creation and rest. A soft asterisk ding asterisk dot 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 reaches your ears. It is a clear, pure, bell-like tone that seems to come from both very far away and deep inside your own chest. Asterisk ding asterisk dot dot dot. A moment of perfect silence. Asterisk ding asterisk. It is the monastic bell in the chapel tower, marking the nocturnal hour of matins, the night office. But tonight, its sound is not a call to duty. It is a resonant, calming anchor in the sea of darkness. Each chime is a wave of peace that washes through the stone corridors, through the wooden doors, and through you. Asterisk ding asterisk. With each tone, feel a wave of relaxation spreading from the crown of your head down to the tips of your toes. Asterisk ding asterisk dot dot. Your forehead smooths. The space between your eyebrows grows soft and calm. Asterisk ding asterisk dot dot dot. Your jaw relaxes, your teeth parting slightly. Asterisk ding asterisk. Your shoulders, which you may not have even known were tense, surrender their weight completely to the supportive wall behind you. Asterisk ding asterisk dot dot. The sound travels all the way down your spine, a ripple of letting go, until your whole body feels heavy, dot dot dot, warm, dot dot, and perfectly at peace. The bell fades, and its absence leaves a silence that is deeper and more profound than before. The moonbeam through the window begins to pale. The darkest part of the night is passing. The deep indigo of the sky outside is softening, ever so slightly, to a velvety grey. The fire in the great hall is now just a bed of glowing embers, pulsing softly with a deep orange light, like a sleeping dragon's heart. Asterisk, hiss, dot dot dot, crackle, dot dot dot, pop dot dot. Asterisk. The sounds are fewer now, slower, each one a punctuation mark in the long, quiet sentence of the night. Brother Cedric will not stir for some time yet. The monastery belongs to you, and to the silence, and to the gentle, lingering spirit of the melody. You feel the parchment of the manuscript under your resting hand, dot dot. It is not cold, but holds a soft room temperature warmth. The ink of the marginalia feels slightly raised, a tactile history you can trace with your fingertips without even looking. You decide to play the melody one more time, but this time, you play it only in your mind. You hear each note perfectly, a silvery thread of sound in the quiet of your thoughts, the deep hum of the lowest string, the brighter, softer pluck of the higher ones, the gentle progression that feels like walking down a familiar, peaceful path in a dream. As you mentally play each note, imagine a tiny golden light blossoming at the tip of each finger, a soft, warm, harmless light that glows for the duration of the note, and then gently fades as the next one begins. Your hands are resting, but they are filled with a gentle, healing energy, a warmth that soothes any ache, dot dot, any lingering strain from your long journey. This warmth spreads from your hands, up your wrists, along your arms, a comforting, liquid warmth that merges with the warmth from the kitchen flue at your back. You are cradled in warmth, dot dot dot, front and back, dot dot, a perfect, cozy equilibrium. The melody in your mind begins to slow, dot dot dot. The notes are now appearing further and further apart, each one a beautiful, solitary event that you can savor completely before the next one arrives. There is a space between the notes, and that space is just as important as the music. It is a space for rest, for breath, for simply dot 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 being. In that space, there are no expectations, no journeys to be made, no songs to be learned. There is only the deep, comforting stillness of the ancient stones, and the slow, steady rhythm of your own heart. The melody in your mind has now become so slow, dot dot dot, so stretched out, that it is no longer a tune, but a series of isolated, perfect moments of sound, like distant wind chimes on a calm day. And now, even those begin to fade, becoming part of the silence from which they came. The golden light at your fingertips softens to a gentle amber, and then fades completely, leaving your hands feeling perfectly relaxed, perfectly heavy, perfectly still. The manuscript on the desk is just a dim shape in the fading moonlight. The marginalia creatures are still once more returned to their inked slumber, guardians of a secret now shared. Your lute is a silent friend beside you. The embers in the hearth sigh one last, soft sigh. All is well, all is safe, all is deeply, profoundly peaceful. And in this perfect peace, there is nothing left to do, but to rest, and to drift, deeper, and deeper still, into a soft and dreamless sleep.